Before the sun rose from the top of the mountain, two men stood in front of the house, waiting for the hunters to escape. The three of them made an appointment to talk. We went into the forest this morning. When the hunters came out, the three of them got together. We set out, heading towards the edge of the forest. When they reached the edge of the forest, the hunter arranged the things he had prepared. He performed a ceremony to inform the forest god and the mountain prince. A gust of wind blew and hit the bodies of the three hunters. When the hunter put the incense sticks into the ground, the three hunters smiled at each other.
We must head west, right?
Frankong set up a question. The hunter was careful. He nodded and said,
Yes, exactly like that.
But we have never been to that forest before. Let's go into it.
Frankon said with a face that looked like he was worried. The hunter smiled and nodded in acceptance. When the incense sticks had burned out, they all went together. They walked forward in the direction that the hunter had told them. All of them had travelled for some time, so they invited each other to sit down and eat breakfast under a big tree. Frankong pointed out the hunter to look at a squirrel. All of them had travelled for some time, so they invited each other to sit and rest, to eat breakfast under a big tree. Frankong pointed out the hunter to look at a squirrel. It is a large squirrel. The fur on the top is burnt brown. The underside is cream and orange. The tail is long and bushy and black.
Fire squirrel, black.
Francleo said with a plain face. When they had eaten, they all continued their journey. The three hunters travelled together and arrived at the swamp area. The sun was near their head. Frankun took out a pipe and wrapped it around. He lit a fire and extinguished it. He said,
When we rested, we were tired. I said we had to hurry. Let's help each other find the way to the animal checkpoint.
That's it, this swamp. Looking at it, it's also wide. Until you can walk around the swamp, it may take 1 to 2 hours.
That's it, this swamp. Looking at it, it's also wide. Until you can walk around the swamp, it may take 1 to 2 hours. Fran Klaev and Fran Kun both nodded their heads. They showed signs of agreement. Fran Kong moved and stood up, picked up some tobacco and smoked it, then move and walk. Fran Kun and Fran Klaev then walked out to follow.
There are a lot of bamboo trees in the forest around here.
Fran Klaev set up a post.
Yes, if we come across a checkpoint, will there be trees to clear them all?
Fran Gong said,
If we don't find a checkpoint today, we'll have to find a tree. We'll go to a place to sleep tonight.
Franken said,
Look at the trees, just in case. You won't waste time. Come look for them again if you can't find the checkpoint.
The hunter told his friend the hunter. We had been walking and searching for almost an hour. We still had not found the way to the animal checkpoint. We were not yet out of the middle of the swamp. The hunter was so careful that he stopped to take a rest.
The forest in this area is very dense.
Frankun Tankrathu.
That's how the trees are densely packed. No animals are sure to break in.
Frankong said, Answer, bow bow. Fran Klev stood and smoked tobacco, listening silently. He did not express any opinions. We stopped for a short rest after feeling tired. The three of them continued walking. After walking for about 20 minutes, we came across some traces.
Animals probably use this route regularly,
Franken said.
That's it, look at Roy.
Frangong added.
There was not a single grass growing. We walked until the dust grew like this. There must have been animals drinking water all day and all night.
When they found the way to the animal checkpoint, they all walked together, looking for trees to use for scrubbing them all this evening.
There was a wild fig tree. The tree was full of figs. It was ripe.
Fran Kong said and pointed it out.
Under the fig tree, there were many animal tracks.
Franken said in an excited voice. The hunter was afraid, so he turned and looked at the hand of the hunter who pointed it out. Wild fig tree. It is a medium-sized tree, about 10-20 meters tall. The trunk is smooth and brown in color, Young branches are green. Some branches are green mixed with brown. Older branches are brown. Flowers emerge in clusters. Inflorescences have stems. They occur in groups on short branches that branch off from the trunk. And large branches. The fruit is round, oval, or oval-shaped. It has hairs growing out in clusters on the branches and trunk. When the fruit is torn off, tiny pollen is found inside the fruit. The ripe fruit is red.
There are fig trees near the checkpoint. There are many signs of wild animals that have stopped by.
Franken said, ready to walk and explore. Fran Kong and Fran Cleo nod their heads to show their agreement. Then they all help each other. Look for a nearby tree to use for scrubbing them all. Look for animals this evening. After helping each other look for a while, we found a tree that had the size of a trunk, not too small, not too big, and had branches that were suitable for polishing a shopping mall. The trunk is straight, tall, and airy. It has forked branches. It is exactly 6 to 8 meters high. It is still within shooting range, not far from the wild fig trees and the animal checkpoint. When they got a tree for polishing the mall, the three of them sat together to rest before inviting each other to eat lunch. When they had eaten, they all walked back to the bamboo forest to find bamboo trunks to cut to use in making kale. They all helped each other to look for bamboo trunks that were the right size. Then they chose to cut only the ones that were about the same size. When they had the complete amount of bamboo, they carried them all back to the tree where they would be used for polishing. Department store. When they reached the area of the tree, the three hunters started to help each other polish the mall. The hunter climbed up and climbed up the tree. The other two hunters took turns handing out bamboo. Fran Kong handed over wood. Fran Kun stood guard, watching out for danger. The two hunters took turns. Let's go back and forth like this. By the time we finish polishing the mall, it's getting close to evening. The hunter climbed down from the tree. When his feet touched the ground, he invited the two hunters to walk away from the tree used for polishing the mall. Head back to the bamboo forest. When they arrived at the bamboo forest on the edge of the swamp, Fran Kong hurriedly cut bamboo trees to use as rice bushes. Fran Kun looked for wood to make a fire. Fran Cleo walked to the edge of the swamp to gather vegetables. When he had everything, Samphran brought rice, prepared to arrange, cook rice. When the rice was cooked, the hunter took it and divided it into cups made from lotus leaves that had been collected from the banks of the pond. Along with the rice, he walked to the base of a bamboo tree. The two hunters looked along and saw the hunter clasping his hands together and worshipping. They stayed for a while. After a moment, I walked back and sat down. Freshly cooked rice, mixed with wild chili paste. Beetles send a fragrant aroma throughout the area. Chili paste is eaten with morning glory shoots. Mimosa vegetables flow over young lotus. Wild bamboo shoots are burned on fire. All three eat rice with their hands, with gusto. When the three Frans finished eating, they sat and rested for a moment. Fran Gong and Fran Kun separated. They went to do their own business, before going to the mall. When the two Frans returned, Fran Clu separated to do some personal business. When everyone had finished doing their own business, the three hunters walked together. Go back.
When they reached the tree that was blocking the mall, Fran Kong, Fran Kun raised their hands in worship. They recited a prayer for a moment. They picked up some dirt and put it on their heads, before they all climbed up to the top of the mall.
The hunter arrived and sat with his hands folded. He recited the mantra, and walked around the tree. His hands scattered sand all over the area. After completing 3 rounds, he climbed up and followed his 2 hunter friends up. On the mall, Samphran went up to the mall. Not long. The sun was nearly hidden behind the treetops. Evening time. As the sun began to lose its light, birds could be heard singing loudly from time to time. It was a sign that today's time was nearing its end. When the light disappeared, darkness began to cover the entire forest. The banks of the swamps crawled, and the night insects gathered together. They cried out and sang. A loud noise spread throughout the forest.
You two, please lie down and rest and exercise your energy. For the first time, I'd like to sit and watch.
Fran Klong said softly, softly, in a voice of concern.
Fran Klayu, you sit at the beginning of the morning. In the second shift, I will sit myself.
Franken said. With a strong voice, there was a push. Fran Clave nodded in response. Before speaking in a normal tone, he said,
Yes, if something is wrong, you can always wake me up.
Franken moved to put down his gun, put his hand on the railing to protect the people, then leaned back against a tree, hugging his chest. Before closing his eyes, he fell silent. Soon he fell into a deep slumber. Fran Kleev and Fran Kong both picked up tobacco, lit it and smoked it. Before Fran Kleev spoke in a carefree voice.
It's still early in the evening. I'm not sleepy yet. I'd like to sit for a while longer.
Fran Kong smiled at him in the dark. He nodded. He didn't say anything. The 2 hunters sat still when they finished smoking their cigarettes. They both remained silent, listening to the sounds of the forest.
Tonight the moon rises, but the early evening is earlier than every night before. The weather is already starting to cool.
The hunter said, the sound of water shaking, shaking. Before moving, he picked up a cloth to control his body.
The hunter listened to the sounds of birds and night insects. His eyes looked at the moon. It was floating. It stood out above the treetops. Before he leaned back against the tree. But before he closed his eyes saw movement. The hunter. He moved to get up and saw Fran Kong staring at him. Fran Kong gives a signal. Use a finger to touch the middle of the mouth. It indicates to be gentle. Do not use your voice. 2 Fran sits and looks at the picture. The movement below. Song Fran was not alarmed or startled by the sight he saw below. His eyes focused on the group of people he saw. They were walking closer. The sounds of muffled conversation were approaching. The sound of Thai music could be heard. The sound of the xylophone, bagpipes and gongs floats along in the wind. The 2 hunters turned to look at each other. They showed expressions of wonder. Where was the music coming from? Because in this area there were only forests and trees. When the group of people slowly walked past the trees that lined the mall,
Where will we take each other?
Fran Kong whispered softly, softly, with a questioning tone.
Probably going to the event, just as we heard the music here.
The hunter whispered and answered with a questioning tone as well. Then the 2 of them were silent. The hunter moved and leaned back. He leaned against the tree and fell asleep. The hunter looked at his fellow hunter. The 2 were still asleep beside him. His hand tightened on his gun. His eyes looked at a fig tree. Alternately looking towards the animal gate, it was approaching midnight. From the sycamore trees there could be heard the sound of a murmur, the sound of the branches swaying. Sometimes it might have been a bat or a civet. Below there was a rustling sound. It must have been a porcupine passing through the entrance. Come, Fran Kong thinks, in his heart. Fran Kong sat and waited for the animal to come. but there was still no sign of it. Feeling sleepy, he poked and woke up Franken to take over the next shift. Franken moved and sat up. He took over his duties from Frankong. Franken has taken over from Frankong for some time. At this time, it was almost the 3rd hour. There was still no sign of any wild animals. Throughout the entire time Franken had taken over, there had been nothing out of the ordinary. Franken roused Fran Cleo to get up and take over from himself. Fran Cleo moved and stood up. The eyes of the wise hunter stared at the wise hunter. It was as if he were asking if there were any animals coming in. The wise hunter shook his face softly. He knew it. Even though the wise hunter did not speak, any words came out. Franken slowly leaned his back against a tree. The hunter reached out and looked towards the checkpoint. When the noise of the night insects suddenly quieted down. Suddenly, a sound was heard. The footsteps of animals could be heard approaching. The hunter reached out and looked towards the checkpoint. When the noise of the night insects suddenly quieted down. Suddenly, a sound was heard. The footsteps of animals could be heard approaching. The hunter was calm, listening attentively to the sound of footsteps walking. Calmly, the hunter's eyes were still focused on the sound of walking that was loudly approaching. Franken moved to get up. He stretched out his hand to wake Frankong up. One hand reached in. He went into his bag and took out a flashlight. Frankong got up. His eyes stared towards the checkpoint. Before he saw a black shadow, a figure slowly walked towards him. Kwang, Frankong thinks, in his heart.
The hunter picked up the gun. Gently, he raised the gun and put it in the shotgun. The hunter held still. He waited for the deer to come within range of the maul. Appropriate.
Samphran waited for a moment. Finally, the figure walked closer. Samphran looked at it in the haze, from the faint moonlight, shining down. It hit the ground. Then there were 2 or 3 more. The figures walked next to each other. Immediately, the bright light from the flashlight brightened. Beams of light hit the dark, shadowy figure. A loud noise. The forest rumbled. The deer fell down and struggled for a moment. Then it was silent. The night insects. They all fell silent. The rest of the deer ran back and disappeared back the same way. An instant passed. The night insects began to return. The sounds of screaming and singing became louder as usual. Samphran looked at the body of a deer lying motionless under the maul. His skills did not fail at all. Frankong said that he praised his fellow hunters in his heart. The hunter picked up a tobacco pipe, wrapped it up, lit a fire and smoked it, spewing a long trail of white smoke into the air.
The sound of the gunfire has caused the forest to fall apart. There will probably be no animals coming to eat the figs or walking past to drink water tonight.
Franken said in a worried tone. A red light flashed at the end of the roll, and the hunter quickly blew out a long stream of tobacco smoke floating in the air.
Soon it will be light. Let's lie down and rest and continue exercising.
The hunter said softly, with a voice of concern.
I can't sleep anymore. I'd like to sit with you as a friend.
Frankong said in a refreshing voice. Franken leaned his back against a tree.
I would like to continue sleeping. If another animal comes in, they can wake me up.
Franken said in a weak, tired voice. Before falling asleep again, the hunter sat and looked at the body of the deer in order to protect it from the animals that would eat the meat, sneaking up and stealing the deer to eat. The 4th watchman had not long passed. Suddenly, the sound of night insects quieted down. Once again, the hunter could sense the abnormality that had occurred. Fran Kong turned and looked at Fran Kong. His hand picked up a gun and held it. Fran Kong looked, meeting Fran Kong's eyes in the blur. Before turning his eyes, he looked around the area.
Or will I lie?
Fran Kong whispered in a questioning voice. Before reaching out to shake and wake Fran Kun moved to get up. He grabbed a gun and held it. His eyes stared at the ground below.
Is it the owner of the roaring sound that was heard in the early evening?
Fran Kun asked in a soft whisper. His voice was alarmed.
But the sound that was heard should have been far away. Many mountain peaks, it should have been different people.
Fran Kong whispered, answering Fran Kun.
I couldn't smell anything anywhere. We were downwind. It might not have been him. We heard the sound. It could have been in the early evening.
Fran Kong added in a soft voice. The hunter pondered in his heart. Then what is it that makes the insects silent? Both ears are attentive to the sound. The eyes are gazing all over the area, searching for any abnormalities. Prang Kun Fran Kong. Use your eyes to look at the ground below and around the trees under the mole to help find abnormalities.
Or it will be like the rumours that he told.
Fran Clef said softly. Old people say that this pond has a mystery. The water in the pond never dries up. Therefore, there are many wild animals living there. Or people come to drink the water during the dry season. There is mystery, mysterious things. Forest ghosts, many demons. On the full moon night that falls on Buddhist holy days, there will be the sound of music, the sound of drums, the sound of bagpipes, and the sound of fiddles. The sound of the gong, the sound of the xylophone, the sound of the cymbals ringing out in the wind to always be heard. Even though the village and the swamp are very far away from each other, sometimes the sound sounds like they are near, close. It's like they are only at the edge of the forest. But sometimes the sound sounds like they are far away. Elderly people believe that this pond may have once been the location of a village that then moved or fell into ruin over hundreds of years. This pond used to have many hunters from other areas. Many of them gave their lives. Some people lost their minds. They also went crazy and mute. Some people disappeared without a trace. Some people were hit. Forest ghosts playing. Trouble. Maybe because they did something wrong in the forest. The three hunters sat and talked. They consulted each other. In a soft voice, like a whisper, they talked about what had happened. There was no smell of eye. They did not find any abnormalities. That made the insects and animals nocturnal. Silence fell. The three hunters wondered what was making the forest quiet. Immediately the eyes of the three hunters saw a bright light. There were people walking in rows. They were approaching. The sounds of mumbling noises could be heard from time to time. Samphran all kept silent and looked. There were many people, dozens of them walking in a row. Some were holding children. Some were holding children's hands. They were talking and mumbling. Some children were running, playing, teasing each other. Some were making noises and laughing.
Strange, walking so close, but the voices of those people talking, I still couldn't understand them. I couldn't understand the words.
Fran Gong spoke softly. His voice was suspicious. When the first person walking in front of him came to the body of a deer that was lying there, he suddenly acted startled, and backed away. The rest of the people were startled. A voice of incomprehensible cries and noises sounded. Some people walked up to look. They were curious. Then they turned back. Some people walked up and stood and looked silently. Some little children were startled. They ran and screamed. but the confusion soon subsided and the people walked away before the last big man walked past the lying deer, scorching the sound of the gun from the hunter. It roared loudly in the forest. Hook, the sound of screaming and roaring loudly. That man fell down and lay motionless. The rest of the people ran in different directions. In different directions. Fran Kong and Fran Kun were shocked. They turned to look at the hunter. The hunter escaped. He didn't say anything. He came out. Instead, he pointed his hand at the body lying peacefully. Fran Kong, Fran Kun turned and looked at their hands. The two of them were surprised again at what they saw below. The figure of that man gradually changed. From a human body, he gradually changed into a wild boar.
What is this? Just a moment ago I saw that it was a person who was convulsing, but now why did it turn into a wild boar?
Fran Kong spoke softly with a surprised tone.
That striped creature was crying far away. It must have gotten angry and everyone was startled by the sound of a gun. It ran away.
Franken said in a soft voice.
In the early evening, that group of people walked past us. I felt that it was strange. After a while, I recited a mantra to clear my mind of the mystery. So I saw a different picture from the two of you and the golden boy. He came and whispered in my ear that what was seen was actually a wild boar.
Fran Cleo said in a normal tone.
No wonder, after a while, we both saw that it was a person walking in a line. I was still shocked as to why. You had shot that man.
Frangong said in a voice of relief and admiration. Soon, the sound of wildfowl began to sing. The roosters came, signaling that a new day was beginning. Silver and golden light began to shine and catch the horizon. When the sky and the forest were bright, so bright that the lines of a hand could be seen, the three Frans climbed down from the trees. When their feet touched the ground below, the Samphran smelled the scent of wild flowers. The smell of the tiger's curse floated on the wind and mixed together. A faint scent floated against the Samphran's nose. It sent a signal to him. Not long ago this lie. It has come. It's been circling around here.
The smell of the lie. I wonder about that one from last night, where it sneaked in. Followed that herd of wild boars.
The hunter said in a confident voice. But the three hunters were never careless. Then the three hunters walked towards the bodies of the deer and the wild boar. The three hunters' eyes searched the area for traces.
Father, that tiger, it doesn't live around here. That striped thing has already run up the mountain. Father!
The small, bright and mischievous voice of Kumanthong whispered in the ear of the hunter.
On the way to the checkpoint, there were only footprints of wild animals. It was all over the place.
Frengong said. His voice was suspicious, mixed with surprise.
There were tracks of wild boars and many other wild animals. There were deer tracks.
Franken joined in with a tone of voice showing surprise.
I say let's take the deer and the wild boar and go back to the village. If we eviscerate them here, I'm afraid it won't be safe.
Fran Cleve said, softly in his voice. There was a little bit of worry. Frankong nodded, showed agreement, didn't speak, responded. What came out? Frangong and Frankun took on the responsibility, helped each other find vines, find bamboo stalks to cut, make poles to carry the wild boar. As for Fran Cleu, he took on the duty of guarding the bodies of the deer and the wild boar. When the two hunters got vines and bamboo, the two hunters went back together to find Fran Cleu. The three Frans helped each other. They tied up the beams and carried them until they were tight. When they finished, they went together to carry the pigs and deer. The next afternoon, they returned to the village. They all set out on a short journey, heading back to the village. Tired, they stopped to rest under the shade of a tree. After recovering from their tiredness, the 3 Frans set out to continue their journey. But when they returned, they were not as slow as when they had come. When the 3 hunters arrived at the edge of the forest next to the village, the time was almost late in the afternoon. The 3 hunters hurriedly walked along the path, heading towards Fran Cleo's house.
Bear with each other a little more. That's it. You can see the roof of the house. The hunter is careful. He's not far away.
Fran Kong spoke. His voice had strength and determination.
We went to rest, exhausted, at Fran Cleo's house. All at once. After smoking tobacco in time, we were already at Fran Cleo's house.
Franken added, adding in a tired voice. Soon, the 3 hunters arrived at the litter in front of the hunter's house. They all stopped to rest in order to relieve their tiredness and fatigue.
Water, brother. Let's come. We're tired. Tired. Let's drink water first, brother.
The young woman spoke with a loud voice, showing her concern. The voice, sweet, clear, of the young woman, the beautiful woman of the Fran Cleo, rang out behind the 3 Fran. The Fran looked at the bowl of water sprinkled with jasmine flowers, in the hand of the young wife, ready to extend his hand. Take it and drink it, then send it to Frangong and Frankun respectively. When the 3 hunters stopped to rest until they were relieved and exhausted, they helped each other. They brought the deer and placed it on a wooden table. Then they helped each other to dissect the deer's body. Give it to the baker to boil. The young baker held out her hand to receive. Then she walked back and disappeared into the kitchen. Not long after, she heard the sound of pounding chili. It came from the kitchen. For a moment, the noise in the kitchen disappeared. After a while, the young baker made a louder sound.
Brother Cleo, the meat and entrails are already cooked. Brother, I have cut the meat and entrails, dipping sauce, rice, and water. I have arranged them on a tray. Then you come and take them out. There you go.
The young woman calls out in a soft, sweet voice, mixed with charm. The hunter escaped, so he separated himself. Picked up a tray in the kitchen to bring to the king of the forest. Thank you for your kindness. Send me an animal that is destined to die. Thank you for helping to protect it. Protect it from danger. Protect your head, that you help me to be safe from ghosts and beasts. After informing the forest prince and the mountain prince, the hunter walked back to help the 2 hunters dissect the deer and the wild boar. Samphran divides the meat according to proportion. And don't forget to give some to neighbors. Samphran takes meat and organs and distributes them to every house. Imwe naminwe etge chinkerb thukban ale. Frankung chueng fakan. Eiktau klabantening. The sunlight shines down, hitting the forest. The golden light of the evening begins to trickle through the trees and bamboo shoots, creating shadows across the ground, which is covered with grass and dry leaves. The area of the house where Franclave lived was a small village. There were houses built far apart from each other. There were less than 10 houses. Looks simple, blends in with nature. The surroundings of the village are filled with trees and bamboo that grow densely. As darkness fell over the forest land, tranquility replaced it. Only the sounds of insects and nocturnal animals could be heard from time to time. 5 days later, the hunter Cleo and the 2 hunter friends. We made another appointment to go into the forest.
Piclu, please hurry and take a shower. It's almost evening. We will come and eat dinner together. It's already very cold.